All right, we are back. I have another one of the UW Interfaith Fellows joining me today. I'm super pumped to talk with her. Rida, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for taking time to do this and for talking about religion on a what is it, a Tuesday night. So I guess first off, I don't know anything about you. This is the first time we're talking. So you said that before we started recording that you're a senior at UW this year. Is that correct?
Yes, this is my last year at UW, and I will be graduating with a degree in political science and international studies, with minors in integrated liberal studies and political economy, philosophy, and politics. So it's a
Wow.
mouthful, but we're
Yeah.
getting there.
That's awesome. Good for you. You must be super
Yeah.
smart. I remember when I was
Uh,
going to college, I had just the one major and it almost didn't work out for me. So good on you for expanding. Where are you from originally? Like, are you from Wisconsin or are you from out of state?
So I am from Milwaukee area, Wisconsin, but I was born in India and I moved to the States when I was 7 years old.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's awesome.
Mhm.
I definitely want to
Yep.
talk about that. Well, cool. So I always start this thing pretty easy question for some. What's your faith and what's your religion at this point in your life?
So I am Muslim. I've always been Muslim, and my family are pretty practicing Muslims. So yeah, we do have this distinguishing factor in the community where you're like a cultural Muslim or a practicing Muslim or just like quote unquote name Muslim. So I would say that we are practicing Muslims, which just means that it affects our day-to-day life and we like incorporate it daily, like we do the five daily prayers, and it's like a very significant aspect of our life in terms of decision making. And yeah, just it's more of a lifestyle rather than, oh, I only practice it on X day or just one special holidays when I'm going to be Muslim. So it is, yeah, I would say it's a pretty big part of my family and I's life. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Did your parents also grow up in the Muslim faith, or was it something that they
Yeah.
joined?
hmm Yeah, so my family has been Muslim for like as far back as I can remember, and just well, I've been taught about our lineage and family tree. I am also Indian, so that's a, I guess, intersectionality that a lot of people don't really consider. Like when people do think about Muslims, they just think about maybe like the Middle East or like Pakistan, but like to contextualize it a bit, India does have like a significant population of Muslims, and although we are a minority, we are like the biggest minority in India. And for example, the entire population of Pakistan is about 200 million total, but that is the same amount of Muslims that are in India. So just to
Oh, wow.
contextualize, like there's also like about 200 million Muslims in India. So it's not very like you don't really feel like a minority there, although in recent years there has been a lot of right-wing governments that have been cracking down on minorities, including Muslims and that. So yeah, I like to tell people like I never felt much like a minority until I came to America and people were
Hmm.
telling me, oh, like it must have been hard to be a Muslim in India or like being an Indian Muslim. I'm like, oh, I don't know, like it's pretty normal. Like it's not like we're I don't know. I guess it's just in a nutshell where we don't feel as much of a minority in the homeland, I suppose,
Yeah.
as people make
No,
it out to be.
that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I always tell people like I'm a dumb person. I'm trying to be more cultured in life. And it like you just whenever you hear about India, the first religion that pops into my head is Hindu. I assume that is I haven't done any research on that, but I assume that's the largest religion in the country.
Yes, it is a majority. However, India has a lot of diversity and it is like it has a significant not majority, significant amount of Christians and Jainism and Sikhism. And overall, there's a lot of ethnicities within India itself. So, for example, if I just visit the state next door to where I'm originally from, like I will also get a culture shock because I don't know their language, I don't know their customs, and their culture
Wow.
is completely different, their religion is completely different. So there's hundreds of languages spoken in India and there's no national language. So in that sense, like India is very multicultural in itself. So like what we think about when we picture India is not, it's very surface level, and within Indians themselves there's a lot of diversity and a lot of different religions and cultures that we ourselves like continue to learn about as we coexist with everyone. So it's pretty interesting growing up with this context in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like India is very. You said it's culturally diverse. Does it feel
hmm
like it's more accepting of differences, like difference in faith or politics or whatever it might be?
I'd like to say it is because that's just the community I've grown up in where,
Sure.
so I'm originally from the state of Maharashtra, which is where Mumbai is, which is one of the biggest cities in India.
Mhm.
And so just in my personal experience, I would say yes, it's very like accepting, it's very tolerant. Like in my own like hometown, there's like a Hindu temple right across the mosque, and you can hear both like in Islam, there's five daily prayers, and there's a call to prayer that's often broadcasted in Muslim areas around the world. So you can hear that five times a day in my city, and then you could also hear the Hindu prayers and ceremonies that happen. So it's like, and no one hates on each other or no one is
Yeah.
protesting that as you might expect. So it's pretty normalized. And also for me, like my neighbors were Hindu and they would have certain ceremonies that required me to join in just like as a participant. And although I don't believe in that faith, my family always like encouraged me to go and take part of it, just to respect it, just because they like needed
Wow.
like me to be there to complete their custom. So although I would have restrictions like, oh, I will not be able to do a certain action because that's like very against my religion. Like, for example, I'm not going to pray to a certain statue of a god that you believe in. But if you need me to just be present and take part in something or eat something, then like my parents sent me to that and I participated in those other faiths like that. So in my personal experience, like growing up as an Indian Muslim was pretty like it made me pretty sensitive to other cultures and religions and like it normalized coexistence in that sense. But I also know that India within itself is also has a lot of racism towards one another, and we
Hmm.
do have a lot of culture clashes. But I'd like to think that we are doing better than most other multicultural societies just because that's been the norm in our country for centuries, and a lot of the problems that are arising now regarding like ethnic divisions and religious divisions has been due to British colonization.
Hmm.
So I would like to point that out. So like a lot of the current political issues and then social divisions do stem from problems and racist legacies that the British left behind. So like a quirky little phrase that like a lot of Indians use is like the British left, but they left their mentality behind. So
Hmm.
that's seen in a lot of aspects in Indian culture now where it's because of like the British norm that was set. Like another like a different example might be like colorism, like being white as a beauty standard, and just that's very normalized, and that was of course brought in by British. And then another similar example is we Indians, or not Indians, in South Asia more broadly, we have a third gender that has existed for centuries, and they're called Hijra in India.
Hmm.
And these people, I don't want to categorize them under one label, but they are transgender, and most of them are transgender, but they do identify as other gender identities as well. And so these people were very accepted in South Asia prior to colonization, including within religious communities, including Islam and Hinduism, which is surprising because I suppose most people would think that religions would bar anything other than the binary gender, like man, woman labels.
Right.
But these people were pretty important. They played really important parts in society prior to colonization, and they were respected. However, after colonization, they were ostracized and marginalized and discriminated against. And then, um, so the religious communities that once supported these people, this group of people, they turned against them. And so, so the issues that like the country and South Asia is more broadly is facing right now. I don't want to blame everything on colonization, but a lot of it does stem from colonization. And yeah, I think that's just important to highlight.
Yeah, no, that's super important. I mean, there's like a couple things happening. There's the before and after of colonization, but then within like all of the bad stuff that happens after and during colonization comes this like
Mhm.
beauty of having a mosque and a Hindu temple across the street from each other and like hearing each other's music. So there's beauty in
Mhm.
the chaos almost, but it's yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I feel like people forget that India was like a British property for a long, long time. And there's some still obviously some still effects to that. So for you, I mean, so you said you came over when you were 7 to the States.
Yes.
Was it hard? Like, was it a shocker coming to a completely different country at such a young age?
Yeah, so I joined elementary school here at the start of second grade. So, and I didn't know English that fluently back then, so that was another barrier, I suppose. And and I guess that is in the 2000s, so it's the post 9/11 era and the Iraq war is still going on. So I think that's when I came here, I became more aware of my Muslim identity because
Hmm.
before it was just like a norm for me, and I was just like, and I felt like society accepted me even though it's in India where I'm supposed to be a minority. I felt like I grew up in a diverse environment, but here, which is in America, which is also diverse, it's a very different dynamic where your identity kind of becomes the first thing people see here rather than like any other part of you. Like, so
Yeah.
it's like, and just like the typical question, like, where are you from, or like, where are you really from, and what's your religion? Why don't you do this? Like, are you a terrorist? Like, it's just like those things are kind of like the first things people start to think about when they meet you, I think, in America, especially. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just a reality, which I think is necessary for like what America is. But I think it was hard just like as a kid, like you don't really think about these things more deeply, but I think for me I was kind of forced to reflect on it, and I think
Hmm.
that's when I actually like always hid the fact that I was Muslim. Like I never wanted to talk about it. Like I never, if someone asked me directly, I just like didn't answer it. I just like talked about something else, or yeah, I just maybe sometimes I even lied. Sometimes I said I was Christian because
Probably
that
easier as a
just like
kid, right?
yeah, that just felt like I just felt more comfortable saying that. And I didn't feel that bad because so in Islam, Christianity and Judaism are seen as earlier versions of Islam. So I was like, it's close enough. It's fine. Like I'm not like gonna get in trouble if like my mom finds out or something,
Right.
or if like God sees this. So like lying about what religion I am. But yeah, I think just as a kid, like I learned quickly to like it's a thing that I shouldn't talk about, and it's a thing that's like possibly gonna put me in uncomfortable or even unsafe situations if people are angry about what they're seeing in the news, or like if they want to vent out losing loved ones in like Afghanistan, like on me, like I understand that frustration, but it's like, you know, it's not fair on anyone.
Yeah,
And yeah, and it's like obviously so many stereotypes and misconceptions and it's not even the kids' fault because their families are affected by it too, and there are adults telling them what to believe in. So,
it's
as a
sad.
kid, yeah, as a kid, it was just like having to deal with that, I guess, was a bit hard, but I think I've grown a lot from then, and I've become more like knowledgeable and more comfortable in my identities. So I would say it's it's been a fairly positive experience since then. So yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, it's like I can't even imagine growing up in that time. Like, first of all, as an immigrant from another country, not even really know the
Mhm.
language as a kid. Because like I remember as a kid, like all I wanted to do is fit in, right? Like all you want to do is what everybody else is doing. And
Yeah.
if I'm feeling that way, somebody that looks like me and sounds like me and has grown up in the States, like as an English speaking person, how much more amplified is that when you are coming from a different country, from a religion, and people, there's like a lot of hatred coming towards people that believe the same things that you believe. Like I can't imagine going through that as
Yeah,
a little kid, and
definitely.
like the way that you even survive that is amazing. And I don't mean
Thank
survive like
you.
like life or death, but just survive and just
Yeah.
be as interested in your culture as you are right now and want
Mm,
to know more about other cultures. Like that's awesome.
yeah.
So did you, when you were growing up, did you have a community of other people that were part of Islam, or was it just you and your family that, were in Milwaukee, and that was it?
So although Milwaukee does have like a significant like Muslim Desi community, in the suburb that I grew up in, which is not like the main Milwaukee area,
Sure.
it was pretty non-diverse. So basically, I was the only Muslim I knew and my family growing up. And I actually didn't really have like a Muslim community until I got to college, which is 3 years ago in 2020. So, and it's only in college where I like became more interested and more comfortable sharing my identity just because I saw that other people were comfortable doing that. And like,
Right.
I was like, oh, wait, it's okay to be Muslim? Like, what? So, yeah, growing up, I didn't know anyone else who was Muslim, which was pretty isolating and alienating now that I think about it. And it didn't have to be. I think it's just because, as I explained, like just because I was made to feel like it was wrong or I can't like talk about it with anyone. So I think just having to hide that part growing up and not having anyone else to relate to or have the same experiences as me or even just like same beliefs as me, I think it all like played into one another and it like increased that isolation. But I think after I started college and I met other Muslims in the community and I like learned about how to use my identity as like a good thing, something that can benefit the community and also teach others about different faiths or how we're all similar in one way or another or how there are so many intersectionalities and commonalities between us. I think doing that has like not only helped me become more comfortable in my identity, but also showcase that like faith is actually an important part of society. Like even though we are in a secular country that stresses separation, you can't separate that from the person, and that person is going to be involved in your communities. They're going to be your teachers. They're going to be, your doctors, and that's going to shape their outlook and morals on life. So it's important to know what they believe in and how that affects their life in that way. So yeah.
Yeah, that's well
Mhm.
stated. It's interesting. My college roommate Faraz, who came on this podcast last year, also Muslim, and he had a similar experience to you, where I think that it was his religion was really tied up in his family. Family, separated it. They would follow all of the customs that I think similar to you guys. I forget how you described it. A practicing Muslim. I think he would describe himself
Mhm.
as that. But when he came to college, like it was an opportunity for him to see, like, oh, there is other people that are like me and believe the
Mhm.
same thing. So it's interesting that that dynamic, and I wonder if that is something that isn't unique to Muslims. Like, was something that a lot of the people that you met when you got to college, like, was that their experiences as well of like not really having a community and now being in school, being able to have that community?
Yeah, so as part of my fellowship, which is the Center for Interfaith Dialogue that's at UW this year, I met a fellow Catholic student who felt that way, which I was surprised by because I was like, wait, but you're like the mainstream.
Right.
You're but you're like Christian. But it was really interesting because he described his experience as also similar, like isolating because his family, he comes from an interfaith family where I
Is
think
it
one
James?
parent is, yeah, it is James.
So James came on this podcast, so this is awesome. Keep
Yeah,
going.
I heard. Yeah, so James was describing like how his one parent is practicing or and another parent like was really hostile towards Catholic and the Catholic faith and many other religions. And it was interesting to see like his experience and how he's found Catholicism to be so ostracized and in like the media and just pop culture as a whole. Like, and that gave me like a very interesting perspective. Like I never thought about it like that just because I was like, oh, Christianity. It's like everyone loves Christianity. It's like
Everybody. Yep.
fine. But like the Catholic perspective was interesting in that like people are always quick to shun Catholicism as, oh, it's they don't believe in science or they're so harsh on like LGBTQ community or they're so like unaccepting. Whereas like these things, like if you actually study Catholicism or like separate that from like certain like leaders or certain like institutions that aren't fundamentally like I guess they shouldn't reflect the entire faith as a whole. Like then you find out like oh like Catholicism is also pretty cool. Like it's pretty
Right.
accepting and it's not as like harsh or strict or unaccepting as people make it out to be. And it's also interesting how pop culture, especially I guess in Western society, has normalized kind of being anti-Catholic in a sense, or just like it's so easy to find examples of like mockery of the religion and just like there are Halloween costumes that are like nuns or priests and it's
Right.
like but if the same thing was done for Islam or like any other religion, that would have been shut down very quickly. So it's just like the hypocrisy of like what religions we're deeming to be like respected. Oh, and oh, we don't mess with that faith in this sense, but then some other religions, like Christianity or Catholicism in this case, like people are okay with, disrespecting it in certain
Hmm.
ways. So that's just interesting. And I didn't know like and I guess I just didn't realize that is also isolating that religion and its followers in that way. So that's
Yeah.
it's pretty sad to, think about.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I do think that is yeah, I don't know. I need to stew on that one. That's an interesting point. I don't think I've really thought about it in that context before. Um, so for you growing up, obviously your faith and your religion were culturally a huge part of your life. Was was the faith part of it as big? Like did you do you remember like questioning anything growing up or like when you went to high school or was it just something that you did that your family did and that was cool, but who knows if you really bought in?
Hmm. I think for me, my family, I would like to say like that my family is pretty chill. Like I always, I always like admired that about my family growing up. Like, cause now, like reflecting back on it, and now that I have Muslim friends, I know that in a lot of cultures and a lot of like Islamic households, it's very repressive and it's very strict to the point
Mm,
where some of my Muslim friends have like become detached from their faith because because of the rules that were enforced on them, and oh, you can't go out, oh, you can't drink, you can't wear this, like all of that, just because they were so like it was imposed on them in such a hard way and without any explanation or without any kindness, just basic like decency and just basic love, where now they're kind of like anti those customs or those rules of Islam or culture. So I think for me, my experience has been good where I think my family taught me like they taught me the sins or the rules in a way that made sense to me. It was like, oh, you can't drink alcohol because that tampers with your mental clarity, and then but you need mental clarity to be able to pray, and we need to pray 5 times a day. So if you're drunk, then you can't pray.
as
So
I
pray
as I
and
drink a beer in front of you.
you're good. No worries. But like in that sense, like it made sense. I was like, oh, I do value prayer. It's like it clears my mind. It's like the stress reliever. It helps me like just deal with my life and my problems. And it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So it's like I'm not gonna give up praying just because I wanna like drink. Like I don't even like care for that. I'm not that interested in it to begin
Sure.
with. So in that sense, I think like my family taught Islam to me in a very logical way and where I could ask questions without feeling like I would be judged or like without feeling stupid in that way or
Yeah.
without feeling like I was doing something wrong. Like also like I'm supposed to wear the hijab like as a woman and I don't because simple answers I just don't feel comfortable yet doing that and I like don't make any excuse about it. There is also a cultural nuance to that because in a lot of South Asian societies that are Muslim, women don't tend to wear the hijab until they're married. I think it's just
Oh,
like that
interesting.
cultural. It's not really like written anywhere, but that's what I've noticed and I have come to the conclusion of. It's like it's more of like, oh, you should do it because it's like you're supposed to, but it's like, oh, like do it when you're like an actual adult or like I see like a lot of members in my own family like they started wearing the hijab after they had some sort of like great religious awakening or like great epiphany about life and they're so in tune with their religion so they're like oh my gosh why wasn't I wearing the hijab earlier I should wear it now but it's
Sure.
like now they're like 30 or 35 and so it's just like that sense has been instilled in a lot of like South Asian societies in itself like compared to like the Arab Muslims or the Indonesians or the Malaysians like hijab is very prevalent in their youth as well, like in young women, teenagers, girls, because that's just like they've combined religion and culture in that way. But in South Asia, it's different, where it's more, I guess it's instilled, it's like delayed. It's like you become an adult and you come to that own conclusion, whereas it's not like your family is like enforcing it on you. So
Sure.
that can be a good thing, and that could also be a bad thing. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but right now, like especially in right now because of the war in Palestine and Israel and rise of Islamophobia and all that. Even though I was considering, oh, maybe I should wear the hijab soon just because I just feel ready. Now I'm like, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I
Oh, that's
don't
sad.
want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this because I don't want to. And it's like, and I felt like I was going back to like my childhood days where I don't want to tell anyone I'm Muslim. And wearing the hijab, like obviously that you're representing Islam in that way. So yeah, just like in the current scenario, again, the current state of the world, just don't feel like comfortable or safe doing that and like being so public about being Muslim now. So yeah.
Yeah. That's like that's heartbreaking to hear that you can't do the things that you might want to do because of fear of retribution, essentially was what it comes down to. Um
Mhm.
for you, you mentioned that your family was very chill, as you put it, which I love.
Yeah.
But you had questions and they would answer them for you. What were some of the biggest questions about being a Muslim that you had growing up or even today?
Yeah, it was so in Ramadan we have to fast
Right.
from sunrise to sunset, which means like abstaining from food and water the whole day, not even a drop, not even anything. And I remember like I'm hungry, like I'm at school and
Yeah.
and
Pizza day.
like I'm
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like and of course like when Ramadan starts, every class needs to host their pizza party, their ice cream party, like every time that would happen. And it's like why do I have to do this? Like it doesn't make sense. Like and initially I think like a lot of like Muslim kids grew up saying, oh, like to other people who'd ask them like why they're fasting. I think a lot of Muslim people grew up like saying that, oh, it's because we're like trying to relate to poor people and we're like putting ourselves in their shoes by not eating. But like that's like not true. That's
Right.
just like I don't know. I don't know what like impoverished person in the world knows they're going to eat, they're gonna go to sleep with a full belly or so I don't know. I guess that was just like an easy explanation as like a kid. But like when I asked my family the same question, like I don't get why we have to fast, like I'm hungry, like I'm tired in gym, like I'm sleepy, like then I have to do homework and take tests and all that. Then like they'd sit me down and they'd explain to me, oh, it's because this is the month where you are trying to improve yourself as a person, like not just a Muslim, but you're trying to abstain from bad habits and abstain from habits that not only have a negative effect on you but the world. So and like fasting is kind of symbolic in that sense, like you are not only abstaining from food and water, but then it translates into abstaining from like backbiting or abstaining from like poor language or abstaining from like now I can't think of any sins. Like just overall bad habits
Yeah.
and it's kind of a metaphor that way, but there's also like I guess scientific facts about just like how like you don't have that much. I guess it's like you just don't have energy to do these things or like mentally like after you fast for a couple of days you gain more mental clarity and focus. So
Hmm.
even like as a student like that's like the first few days are hard like when you're like having your caffeine crash and stuff, but then afterwards after like your body adjusts to it you actually do feel like more energetic and you feel more mobile and you feel more like rested. And obviously these are like very dependent on like what you break your fast with and just how you're like and if you're engaging with the fast properly, like of course like if you're breaking your fast with like 10 energy drinks and like fast food, like obviously I doubt that you're gonna feel good the next day you're
Right.
fasting. So it's just like if you like do what's best for you and do what's like written out for us to do in the way it's supposed to, then it should benefit you in the long run. And so the point of that is just to say like I feel like my family always explained things to me in a very like in a way that made sense, like given in my age and just given like the realities. Like they were like, yeah, I know that like it was validating. Like they didn't say, oh, get over it. Like there's people in like X place that are experiencing so much worse. Like okay, that just makes me feel bad now. Like it doesn't
Not only
answer
am I
my
hungry.
question. So not only am I hungry, now I'm just like sad that like
Yeah.
I'm hungry and like this person somewhere else in the world doesn't have food, period. Like,
Right.
so like it just the way they always explain things to me made sense and like they never like made me feel bad about it or and they always and I think the goal of that was like so I'm not so I don't think my religion is like illogical or like out to get me or just like out to take all the fun away from life. Like
Yeah.
it's always framed in a way that this is beneficial for you. Like I also always use the example like, oh, I want to do drugs. Like I really do.
Yeah,
Like like I'd like to try it, but I'm not going to because one, that's not allowed in my religion. And two, I know that's bad for me. Like in all like education wise, like we're instilled in us like this is so bad for you. Don't even try it. It's addictive and so like it's only a temporary high and it's only temporary pleasure. And then after that, it's like so many bad things happen physically, mentally. So it's like I think my family always framed religion in that sense where they recognized the appeal of certain things, but then they also recognized, oh, but in the long run, this is what's going to benefit you, and this is how you'll be a good person, or this is how you can make the best use of your life in that way. So I always appreciated that, and I think that's really helped me become more comfortable in my beliefs growing up and now. So yeah.
that's awesome. That's really cool.
Mhm.
You talking about fasting reminded me of the story. So my college roommate for us, I think I told this on his episode, but he was going through fast, and we had these like pre-made meals that you could get from like wherever you got food on campus or whatever. And so he came home
Mhm.
from the gym. He had just like played basketball. He had his food ready to go. We were about to watch a show together, and he like takes one bite and he just goes, or before he bites it, he goes, Miles, what meat is that? And he shows me, and I was like, that looks like pork. And he goes,
Oh no.
oh my God. And he just takes it and throws it in the garbage and walks out the room. I was like, I've never felt so bad for a guy in my entire
Oh my
life.
God.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about like your experiences with your interfaith classmates. What
Mhm.
made you decide to get into the interfaith program? Because I always find it fascinating because the people I've talked with already are like so sound in their own faith, but yet there's this still like this desire to like connect with other people around you. So what was your experience, and why did you get into it?
Yeah, so I got into it last year because one of my best friends was part of it the year before, and I would always like see her coming back from their meetings, and she'd always say what they discussed and what they talked about and how she didn't know that like in Christianity there was also fasting, or in Christianity there was also this, or in Judaism there was also like this rule like kosher food is halal. Like I can eat kosher food. Like and I was so intrigued by all of that, like what she would tell me. And frankly, like because I never saw religion on campus, and I only saw it within the Muslim context, I was wondering like, oh, what does this mean for like students who are practicing different faiths? Like what how does faith impact their day-to-day life? Like for me, like I always have to think about where I'm going to pray on campus, if like if I need to pray in between classes, or like
Sure.
where am I going to do that? So that's how it affects my day-to-day life. So I'm like, so if there are other practicing students on campus, and how does that affect them? Like, do they have like mass to attend? Like, how does that like affect them? Like, just so like I just got curious like from what she would tell me and what she was learning from her Interfaith Fellows. So after that, I got involved last year, and it was really interesting to just engage in those dialogues and just like simply just learn about one another and focus on what are our similarities, what are our differences, like how can we actually work together and like raise awareness towards something like a broader cause that involves other like rest of the campus community. And but unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, I my experience last year was cut short because I studied abroad the second semester.
Oh,
So
cool.
so I only had one semester of my interfaith experience then. But this year it's different because I'm still part of it, but now we took a whole different trajectory with in the sense that we are part of our student affairs, and now we are under the vice chancellor. So now instead of just being dialogue based, we are programming based, where we have to interact a lot with other organizations on campus. Like we're putting on events and we're doing like actual tangible things, I suppose, rather than just conversing within the faith community. We're like reaching out to like just everyone now. So that's been really interesting. That's been a really interesting dynamic. And we have a physical space now. So we're exploring how we're gonna use that to make it accessible to everyone who is either curious about religion or either wants to like start practicing something or just things like that. It's very interesting because now I think we have more flexibility in how we approach faith in the campus and how we like mobilize students for certain causes and tie faith or religion into it, or how we even like bring people in who are very anti-religion or who are very secular, like
Hmm.
because it's still important to recognize that it's like you can't take this part away from society. It's like there's a war happening because of it. There has always been war happening because of it. And just ignoring it doesn't solve the issues. So yeah, this year is very different in that we have a lot of work to do, but yeah, that's why I'm involved and that's how I've been getting more and more involved as we're transitioning. So
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I wish there was something like this. There probably was. I was just too lazy to find it, but it's such a cool program, and everybody that I've spoken with so far is just very passionate about that interconnected dialogue that you mentioned, and like the programmatic work that I've heard that you guys are doing is really cool too. What for you has been the biggest thing that you've learned? You mentioned a couple of them so far, like kosher being also halal, the conversation with the Catholic fellow. What else has been like a surprise for you in going through this journey?
I think a surprise for me has been the fact that non-Abrahamic religions are also very similar to us, and not to perpetuate the us versus them idea, but I always just like when I thought of religions, I always immediately just like related to like Christians and Jews just because they're like our sibling religions.
Right.
But like working with like other faiths like Hinduism and Sikhism, although like I grew up in India, which are like they're like literally Indian faiths, like I never truly like knew what their beliefs were. Like I just
Hmm.
knew their celebrations and their rituals. Like I didn't know like why they were doing that or like what belief is causing them to, have this ceremony where you touch the elder's feet or you dress up the statue of a god and like things like that. Like there was no reason or explanation for that in my experience. So just like learning that background has been very informative because then that also just reveals like universal truths that I guess all religions are kind of focusing on. And it like it just, although it's not correct to say that all religions essentially believe the same things, like I would stir up a lot of controversy there.
Yeah.
But it's just it's just interesting that like even religions that I personally thought were so different and that we have nothing in common, like Hinduism is a polytheistic religion. Like that's entirely different from Islam. Like we are so anti-polytheism. But like I learned that like Hinduism essentially like also believes that it's monotheistic, but like all the different gods are just representations of like one being. And I don't want to say anything wrong, but that was like a really like my mind was blown after like someone told me that and or like I learned that about Hinduism. Like I was like so ingrained to just like categorize it. Oh, it's polytheistic. There's like a million gods. Like literally there's like a
Yeah.
million gods. But but like the view that like a lot of Hindus believe that it's actually monotheistic and there's just like one being, but it's just in like several manifestations. Like that was really interesting. And so it's just like when you talk to people who are very different, you actually find out like they're like you might believe the same thing, but just in like very different ways. And I think
Hmm.
that's really important to focus on. And it's like very important to actually engage in those conversations rather than just like, oh, I'm just gonna talk to my Christian and Jew buddies just because like we have the same God. Like we're cool. Like you can like go and like pray to your like several gods. Like that's like so like unproductive, and that's just not how
Yeah.
society functions. So I think it's really important to actually find out what everyone believes in and find out like what the similarities and differences are, because you'll be surprised what you'll learn and like what misconceptions you might have had that you didn't even know and or that you believed was a fact. Like I was so certain. I was like, I'm literally Indian. Like you can't tell me that Hinduism is a monotheistic religion. Like I can name five gods right now. And like, but it's like, yeah, it's like the view that it's monotheistic. Like I just completely did not think of it like that, or I didn't even give that thought a chance. So it's so important to actually like engage in those conversations and find those things out. So yeah.
That's awesome. It's almost like, so it feels like today, especially in the age of Twitter and people arguing online into the ether,
Mm,
you guys are more interested in the nuance that is like the underlying tone in religion and those conversations. I just think it is awesome. It's so
mm,
cool. What what's next for like for you? And actually, let me ask you a different question. So we've talked a lot about the just the hatred that can happen sometimes when it comes to religion, especially with Muslims since 9/11 and probably even before that. But now that we have another global conflict going on, there's probably still a lot of misinformation about like what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be a Muslim. So for you, like, what would you want to tell someone if they're like, I don't even know what being a Muslim means? Like, what would you tell that person? What does that mean to you?
I think you were cut off
Oh, sorry.
a
Did you?
bit.
It's all good. Did you hear the question at all? I can ask it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of a lag going on. It's no worries. So I was mentioning that, we've talked a lot about hatred that you can get for
Mhm.
being Muslim, and especially since like 9/11 and probably even before that. What would you want to tell somebody in this day and age when we have another global conflict of what it means to be a Muslim? Like, what does it mean to you? Why is it important to you?
I think in the context of the violence that's happening, I think it's always important to assess any situation within its historical context. So if you're labeling something as terrorism, like really take a look at what who you're labeling that as. Like what is it about them, like or their beliefs that is like violent to you? Like
Yeah,
is one entity's actions representing like over a billion people? Like also like this is like a hard no, but I like recently learned that like a child was murdered in Chicago because he's like Palestinian and Muslim and his landlord was just racist. So like
wow.
it's like who are you labeling as a racist? Like a child, or not racist, as a terrorist, a child, and like an innocent family that's so removed from the conflict, or it's just like just actually like sit down and learn about the religion and what it stands for and what are its beliefs, and don't just make assumptions based on what like you see on media, because it's so easy to just like look at a tweet and just say, oh, or just generalize like, oh, this group did this. Okay, so now they're representing all Muslims. Like it's like the
Mm,
same thing that happened post 9/11. And
yeah,
obviously like our leadership like in Congress and whatnot, it doesn't help if they like go along with everything and they also create inflammatory remarks, because like none of what they say is like fact. Like, and we've seen this again and again with our leadership. And it's unfortunate because we should be able to turn to them as like a credible source. But like, and maybe this is political, but
no, you're
like if
good.
my grandpa, who's like over 80 years old was president, I would be like surprised. Like I would not feel comfortable with my grandpa as as the president. It's just like
So
who
you're
are the
saying,
people?
wait, you're saying that too many old white men have been running this country for too long? Is that what you're saying?
I mean,
I totally
basically.
agree. I'm giving
Yeah.
you a hard time.
No. But yeah, it's just like really assess like who you're believing and like who you're getting information from. Like really try to be a free thinker and like don't be a sheep.
Yeah.
Like not to sound like Kanye, but but
Kanye
like it's really
2024.
important to it's just really important to make your own judgments based on like proper information and not just like one-sided views on things and just
Yeah.
like yeah.
Specifically to the faith of Islam, like what would you want somebody to know about your faith directly?
I would want people to know that Islam is very selfless. Like, and Islam doesn't instigate violence. If there is violence, and there has been violence, there are certain types of violence that is justified in Islam, but it's in very specific scenarios where it's like it's because it was self-defense or it was because like there's an intensive like laws and a whole legal outline on like justice in Islam. So but it's never like for perpetrating violence. Islam is actually just very selfless. You're constantly supposed to be sacrificing like personal interests and personal pleasure for like the greater good. Like going back to the previous point, like I can't do this, like I can't smoke or not. Yeah, I can't like do drugs, like I can't drink alcohol. And obviously those things are probably fun. I wouldn't know because I guess
Yeah,
that's
they
bad
are.
for me. But but it's like I do believe that it's benefiting me not to engage in XYZ and it's like sure I'm sacrificing something, but it's like me being selfless. It's me being selfless not only for myself, but also just in in a larger context, like being selfless for my family to, you know, like sacrificing something so like my brother can get a better opportunity. Like Islam is all about like taking care of yourself and your society. You're never removed from either or. It's not just you're individualist, but at the cost of everyone else. You're not collectivist at the cost of yourself. I think there's a very fine balance between the two, in which I like really enjoy about Islam and really value about it. So I think I would want people to know that Islam is never about just like perpetrating violence or like forcing your beliefs onto others. It's about just doing what's best for yourself and those around you, and never has anything to do with forcing someone to share your beliefs or like forcing them to like conform. It's just like it's all about coexistence, and it's just yeah. I think that's what I would want people to get away from it.
No, that's great. That's awesome. I think it's well to say it's hard to be against anything that you just said. So, final question for you here. This is my wife's question. She always tells me to ask, what didn't we talk about that you wanted to talk about, or what question didn't I ask that I should have?
I guess for me, as a political science major or like someone who always sees like the intersectionalities between governments and just their policies. I suppose any like question on like politics would have been cool for me just as like a political science nerd moment.
Sure.
And I think I ingrained a lot of that just in the questions itself as it is. But I guess
Because
like
they're not unrelated, right? Like they're very
yeah,
connected.
for sure. But yeah, I guess anything about politics I would have just personally enjoyed going into that more. But yeah, I think that's just me because I'm just like very into like world affairs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. I mean, it's good for you.
Mhm.
I also was a political science major. I used to love that
Mhm.
stuff. I get more depressed now than anything when I start to
Yeah, I
talk
think I'm
about
headed
it.
the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard, man. Like I've really had to filter out the news that I get because it's like you
Mhm.
just feel hopeless some days. But it's also important to talk about it and be in the know. But that's why I like doing this is because there's no, like I think I told you before we got on, like there's no debate here. It is what you believe, and I'd much rather this
Yeah.
conversation than a political one, just because
Yeah, for
tougher,
sure.
man. It's harder.
Yeah.
But I greatly appreciate your time. Your story is awesome, also heartbreaking, and also just kind of enlightening as well, just to see where the future of the world is going to be with this. Like I know it's a small group of people, but what you guys are
Mhm.
doing is awesome, and just learning about each other while also having this like really strong connection to whatever it is that you believe. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And I wish you all the best in your senior year here at UW.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I
You
really
bet.
appreciated the opportunity.
Of course. Of course.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.